I wake before the day decided what it wants from me. No prophecy, just breath and weight. Tea in my hands like a warm anchor. Then I move my body. Training, not as punishment, not as performance, just a steady conversation with muscle and tendon and fascia. After that, work. Emails, tasks, ordinary responsibilities. In that season, this was my liturgy. Tea and training and work and silence. The surprise was how sacred it felt, not because it was striking, but because it was dependable. It reminded me of Adriana's thread rediscovered. The simple line you hold so you do not get hypnotized and misled by corridors. I think psychology would call this stage reintegration. When your nervous system has been living as if it is under threat, you do not argue it back into safety. You show it, you lead it repeatedly with action that the world has structure. Sleep at a reasonable hour. Food that does not spike and crash you. Training that regulates, not inflames. And work that meets the law of consequence. You do it, or you do not get paid. A mystical idea does not protect you from exhaustion. So I return to the thread, because the only way out of the labyrinth is the next right step. Repeated until it becomes real. This was what carrying both worlds started to mean in practice. Not trying to choose between inner life and ordinary duty, but letting the ordinary become strong enough to hold the inner life without being broken by it. Some mornings, the old surge of interpretation still tried to hijack the day. Over time, even gratitude changed shape. It stopped being abstract. It stopped being forced. It became gratitude for a kettle that works, a body that can train, and a day which can be lived without spectacle, and a life that can now be trusted more than feared. There was a time when my identity felt like a hard shell. If it cracked, everything leaked out. After the descent, I could not rely on that. I had to rebuild slower, and softer and more flexible. Not a new mask, a process. I remember standing in front of a mirror one morning, not looking for enlightenment, just checking my face, my eyes, the tension I held in my body. I could feel how quickly the mind wants to declare a story. I am back, or I am broken, but neither of those extremes helped me live. This is where the Taoist balance return started to make sense, not as philosophy, but as daily practice. In Taoist images, the point is not to win against the dark, it is to keep returning to the middle, to let yin and yang move without letting either swallow the whole field. In psychological terms, I think of it as narrative identity. The self is not a statue. It is a pattern of choices and habits and relationships that can shift without collapsing. So instead of forcing a grand meaning onto what happened, I practiced small integrity. I kept promises I could actually keep. I said I do not know when I did not know. I built reality checks into the day. Balance is not a vibe. It is regulation. And when emotions surged, I did not treat it like destiny. I treated it like weather in the nervous system. Something to notice, something to breathe through, and something to respond to. Then I went back to work. Back to the today. Back to the body. Back to the lawful, ordinary consequence. This is how the identity came back. Less brittle, more true. It also came with a new humility. I know how close I had to come to the edge, and I knew I was only standing because routine, grace, and consequence had started working together again. A friend once asked me, what would a balanced day look like on paper? It pulled me out of myth, drift, and into actual practical logistics. Who am I accountable to today? What needs doing today? Where do I need rest, not stimulation? And I would write it down, and I'd do my best to follow it. and I would return to the thread again. Underneath all of that, another question kept maturing. What does home mean now? Not where I once felt certain, but where my body can trust the day, where my conduct is cleaner than my self-story, where I can look at other people without superiority and without pity. That was the real identity shift. Stability did not arrive as a single moment. It arrived as repetition, a routine so boring and monotonous that it stopped feeding the parts of me that wanted spectacle. At first, my nervous system did not trust it. It did not know it, so I kept the rule anyway. Same wake times, same training block, same work window, same wind down. Over time, something shifted. The body began to believe the calendar. It began to recognize it as truth. It is strange to say it in that way, but it is true. The nervous system trusts the schedule. This is when the mythic mirror I had been given for this stage landed. Seek, savor, service. In the Sikh tradition, savor is service done without ego, not for applause, not to prove you are holy, just because it is right to feed people, clean the floor, carry water, and show up. I started to see my routine like that, making my bed, answering messages, doing the work I said I would do, even training, showing up for the body I live in. It was savor in my own future and to the people who had to live with the consequences of my choices. In psychological terms, it is self-regulation. It is behavioral momentum. You do not negotiate with chaos. You outlast it with structure. Sleep becomes ethical practice. Rest is not laziness. It is the ground that keeps you from taking your unrest out on others. So when the day felt heavy, I did one small act of service anyway. One clean task. One honest apology if I owed it to someone. One nourishing meal cooked. The thread did not sparkle. It held. If my mind tried to spiritualize shortcuts, I reminded myself, meaning never cancels consequence. If I break the basics, I pay for it in mood, in judgment, and how safe I am to be around. Service includes being accountable enough to stay stable. It also includes how I see others, not as characters in my spiral and delusions, not as people beneath me because I survived something difficult, but as human beings carrying their own burdens. That softened something in me. Routine stopped feeling like a cage and started feeling like a valued contribution, a way of being reachable, a way of being dependable, a way of being home in the day. Quiet spiritual maturity did not feel like fireworks. It felt like fewer speeches in my own head, less need to announce what I had learned, more interest in whether I could actually live with it and share it. There is a moment that I remember clearly. I'm in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, doing a task I used to think was beneath me. My mind is getting agitated, then I stop. I unclench my body. I do the next step. That is the whole lesson of the Zen chop wood, carry water mirror. Not as a cute quote, but as a discipline. If you cannot meet the ordinary, you cannot be trusted with the extraordinary. Zen teachers are famous for cutting through spiritual inflation. They point you back to clean action. Wash the bowl, sweep the floor, keep your word. In hindsight, I think this is discernment, what some traditions call mystic sobriety. Psychology might describe it as impulse control and cognitive diffusion, the ability to watch thoughts rise without obeying them and falling into the story. The mind offers drama because drama feels like power, but power without responsibility is just another corridor in the labyrinth. It is a grown man playing Peter Pan. So I practice being ordinary on purpose. The maturity was not a new identity. It was a smaller gap between what I said mattered and what actually did. Chop wood, carry water, repeat. That is how the fire turns into warmth instead of another raging wildfire. It also changed my relationship to witness. The hero no longer felt like a conqueror in the story. The more honest role was witness. Someone who has seen enough of his own distortions and delusions to stop needing to perform wisdom. Someone who can critique systems, self and suffering, with compassion rather than ongoing spectacle. Then I go to bed on time. Eventually, something flipped. Not in the sky, in the kitchen. I am making a simple meal. The knife taps the board. The smell of something hot in the pan. I realize I am not waiting for real life to start. This is it right here. Ordinary life starts to become sacred again. Not because it is perfect, it is far from it, but because it is inhabited. The mythic mirror here is sacred duty from warrior codes. People hear warrior and imagine violence, but the codes I am pointing to are about restraint and responsibility and duty and honor to something larger than self and ego. The warrior is not one who breaks rules because he feels intense. The warrior is one who holds the line when nobody is watching. This is what integration looked like for me. Doing the work, paying the costs, accepting that choices land in the real world, keeping my nervous system steady enough that I do not turn my inner weather into collateral damage. In psychological language, it is character. It is slow construction of trust. Trust with myself and trust with others. And also trust with the future. Not trust as a fickle or fleeting feeling. Trust as a record. Trust as an anchor. So my days became a kind of oath. Holding the thread became the oath. Not hiding behind myth became the oath. When I feel the old longing for an exit door, I remember the labyrinth is not solved by escaping the world. It is solved by returning to it with newfound discipline. This is how the sacred spiral closes a loop. You do not come back with a crown. You come back with a schedule, with a steadier breath, with a willingness to be ordinary and responsible. Meaning never cancels consequence. It only gives consequence a direction, and that direction, day by day, is the thread in my hand. It also changes what home means. Home is not intensity. It is not escape. It is not being admired for surviving. Home is a body I can live in, a room I can tend, a meal I can make, and a life I can stand behind. That is the blessing of return. Not in perfection, but in real, true, lived habitation.